Don't just talk, speak, but softly. Don't just speak, act decisively. Don't just look, see, far and close. Just don't hear, listen long and learn. Don't interrupt. When you interrupt, you are not listening. Don't feel, discern. Don't think, deliberate. Don't argue, debate. Don't sympathize, empathize. Critique rather than criticize. Specify rather than generalize. Don't escalate, de-escalate. Before you can lead, you must learn to follow. To be a great father, first be a grateful son. To parent well, first spouse well. To spouse well, find God's mercy in your life. Mothers lift up their fallen children. Dads show them how to get up themselves. Then make them do it. Early child discipline works. Late is too late and does not. Discipline begets freedom. Boundaries mean protection. Children will emulate your behavior at its lowest level. The opposite of love is not hate, it is apathy. Good dads make mistakes. Bad dads don't try. Ex-DEA and DIA retired SOCOM soldier, deep state targeted, turned whistleblower warrior, sabotaged and slandered, betrayed and saved, rejected and redeemed. As teacher and truth teller, now America's intelligence officer. Resisting tyranny and obedience to God, welcoming like-minded patriots, training next generations to infill corrupted agencies, and St. Martin them inside out, bottom up, co-opting conquerors in Christ. Welcome, I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. And before I get going, we have a big show today. My guest is John Bray to reveal how Charlie Kirk was really killed. We're going to talk about Congress to integrate U.S. and Israeli militaries. Tina Peters free and still claims election fraud and what that means. There's a new DNI, Bill PULTE, and he's tied to NVIDIA data centers that he wants to put, NVIDIA wants to put in your home. And Muslim's Eiffel Tower arson means Europe civilization destruction. But before we get going, I wanted to take a moment and tribute and remember on the anniversary of his death, my father, Maurice Ross Prather. Right there, you can see him in his World War II sailor uniform. He adopted me out of St. Joseph's Orphanage. I'm a product of rape. Then he adopted my sister, then my brother, then my sister. He was the first in his family to go to college. He ended up running 3 companies. He was the patron, the don of our family, brought everyone together, gave all my family members jobs, and everything that I am as a man, I have learned from him. So on this anniversary of his death, just wanted to remind you of that. Thanks for the prayers. Tommy reached out. I did a special on Tommy's show as well for him. And just wanted to remember my great dad, Maurice Ross Prather, because my full name is Jeffrey Ross Prather, by the way. And also, if you haven't noticed there, we have a new show sponsor there, Masculine Man Essentials, and really advise you to try it. I tried it. I love it. And of course, I am a masculine man, and it is a great deodorant. And it is aluminum free. That's the first thing my wife said when I was going to say, hey, I might sponsor these guys. Is it aluminum free? Because she's very healthy, and I've already got too much lead poisoning in me as well. Comes in a great box as well. Bourbon is my favorite scent because, of course, my dad is from Kentucky, and that's the home of bourbon. So before we get to my guest, I want to go over a couple things really quickly. Congress to integrate U.S. and Israeli military. This is really important. So buried in the House's version of the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, which was released on Tuesday, is Section 224 entitled United States-Israeli Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. The provision would do more than intertwine the U.S. military with the Israeli military. More than $200 billion in military assistance Israel has just received from the U.S. since its founding in 1948. Section 224 lays the groundwork for bilateral research and development, co-production of weapons, joint ventures, licensing agreements, and seemingly every manner of U.S.-Israeli military-industrial complex cooperative. So we double the military-industrial complex. The U.S. and Israel already work together heavily on missile defense, but this provision would greatly expand coordination. Of course, that hasn't worked real well versus Iran, has it? But in other words, the U.S. military's data could soon be Israel's military data. This is just making it official because this is what has happened already. But if fully enacted, this proposal would provide a higher level of military-industrial integration than the U.S. has with any other country in the world. The U.S. has worked closely with NATO partners, to be sure, on co-production, most notably the Defense Production Action Plan. And as the #1 arms dealer, that's our biggest export, by the way. The U.S. provides weapons to militaries around the globe, but that is mostly a one-way street, with the U.S. providing weapons to foreign buyers who occasionally make parts for these weapons, as in the case of the F-35's global supply chain, the failed jet, by the way. Section 224 would be a different beast entirely. It would fuse the U.S. and Israeli defense sectors into multiple vital areas of the battlefield, like autonomous systems and cyber. It would also bring extraordinary Israeli influence to the U.S. beyond what it already has through the Israeli lobby, which, looking at AIPAC and looking at the Israeli generals inside the Pentagon and getting free reign inside the CIA, as John Kakao has described, is exceptional. It will give the Israeli government the opportunity to greatly expand one of the most powerful levers of influence in the U.S. politics, jobs in the U.S., by expanding or starting new co-production facilities like it already has in Mississippi and Arkansas, out in the country boys like me. The result could well be a U.S. political system even more susceptible to the whims of an Israeli government, if you can imagine that. This unprecedented level of U.S.-Israeli military cooperation stands in stark contrast to the traditional aid model of defense cooperation, in which Israel stood out as the top recipient of U.S. military assistance. The shift will strip away political and diplomatic oversight mechanisms that make the relationship publicly accountable. I don't think it's very accountable now at all, but whatever is left, I guess, Massey, of course, Massey's out, Marjorie Taylor Greene's gone. They're almost all in the Israeli lobby. A lot of them have dual citizenship. But this comes at a time when the Israeli military has repeatedly used U.S. weapons in strikes that have violated international humanitarian laws in Gaza and Lebanon. And Israel has repeatedly violated ceasefires over and over. And just as a New York Times Siena poll from mid-May said Trump made the right decision to go to war, with 64% saying he was wrong, and an Institute for Global Affairs poll released earlier this week drove deeper into the American psyche when it comes to arming Israel, finding out that just 16% say the United States should keep supplying Israel with weapons without new restrictions. 38% want to stop supplying weapons entirely. Another 24% want weapons conditioned on how they're used, which the Israelis never respond to anyway. Yet mainstream leadership in both parties remains largely pro-Israel and continues to shape the base legislative text before amendments and broader congressional debate open to the full body, as in the case with the NDAA provision. Because it's really the uniparty at this point. MAGA was a coalition. It wasn't really conservatives. And it's no longer certainly America First. And it is really the uniparty, which is really run by the global cabal, as in Kabbalah, which is mostly of the deep states of the world through the Israeli Likud, greater Israelist Netanyahu government. Though slowly, ties within both parties are shifting as more and more members speak out against the growing divide between Israel's actions and America's interests. For example, Senator Chris Van Halen, Democrat, Maryland, wrote New York Times on Tuesday that the Democratic Party has provided reflexive and unconditional support to Israeli governments, even as their actions have increasingly undermined American interests and values. Nothing about the genocide, the killing of women and children, but it's a start. And of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene was outspoken. Thomas Massey, Republicans were outspoken. But we need to stop the Israeli-U.S. military-industrial merger and through Section 224 from the NDAA to avoid the deep integration with Israel's military at a time when a growing number of Americans oppose Israel actions in the regime. And I will come back to Tina Peters and what that means later, and also what the DNI means as well, Bill PULTE, because I don't really want to keep my guest waiting, and also what's Muslim Eiffel Tower arson means to European civilization. But I want to get right into this with my guest because it's very, very important. And the first thing is, he's been saying this for quite some time, I think from last September. So remember, I'm not a news show. I'm an intelligence officer. I've designated myself as America's intelligence officer now that I'm retired. And with all of the theories coming out with the Charlie Kirk killing, I think that John's theory after time is holding the most water. I said some wrong things at the beginning. I thought he had body armor on. That was the mic outline I didn't understand. But I think as a lot of theories have gone by the wayside, certainly the 30-06, never made any sense and is a complete falsehood. John's has gotten stronger with time. So John Bray is an independent forensic analyst specializing in acoustic and video evidence, working entirely from raw source data. He applies signal processing, ballistics, and image analysis techniques to reconstruct the sequence of events behind contested cases, building reproducible analysis pipelines where every conclusion can be traced back to its source, with no synthetic or hard-coded shortcuts. His current focus is independent forensic analysis for the defense in state of Utah versus Tyler Robinson, published openly at followtheepicenter.com. Followtheepicenter.com. Somebody put that in the Rumble chat, please. You can also follow him at Blue Mountain Farm, Blue Mountain Farm, Oklahoma, just like me. There he documents his methods and findings in full and invites scrutiny, holding his critics and himself to the same standards of reproducibility, peer-reviewed sourcing, and rigorous chain of custody. So he's basically doing what the FBI should be doing and is not doing. And remember, I graduated from the FBI Academy back in 1990. I'm very familiar with the FBI lab. So Bray furthered his research after, sorry, that's the wrong one. Forget the 30-06 fairy tale. John Bray is dismantling piece by piece with motion mapping, explosive gas analysis, which is really impressive. I hope he shows us some of that. Shrapnel forensics and custom ballistic dummies that replicate the exact brainstem killing blast. It's likely the Israelis were behind this and they didn't use a 30-06 against Charlie Kirk. They used an exploding lavalier mic. John Bray started to publish on X.com about the label mic explosion on September 17th. Accurate Energetic Systems fatal explosion on October 27th, 2025. The CSB opened an investigation into the fatal explosion that occurred on October 10th at the Accurate Energetic Systems explosive manufacturing facility in McEwen, Tennessee. The catastrophic incident resulted in 16 fatalities, several serious injuries, and severe damage to the facility. Estimated that between 24,000 and 28,000 pounds of explosives detonated during the incident. John seems quite clear that the instrument that killed Charlie Kirk on 10 September 2025 was a small explosive charge placed in the microphone he was wearing under his T-shirt, which was held in place by a black rectangular magnet that can be seen on the outside of the shirt. Bray, who apparently has a background in body armor and develops the refurbishing program for the U.S. Army, provides the most interesting analysis on this. And he appears to be quite technically proficient. Tells us he analyzed videos of the Kirk assassination using what he calls vector map pixel flow software, which he modified for the purpose. The software allowed Bray to accurately view the effects of the energy inhibited by the alleged explosives and the gas, too, with colored images. The gas is really exceptional coming from under the shirt. And so Bray thinks the explosive may have been acquired from Advanced Energetic Solutions, whose facility was completely destroyed as a result of the explosion. That's the typical cleanup that I've talked about with covert operations. Remember my covert operations go back to Iran-Contra. When I was working with the Contras in 7th Special Forces, well, what we were doing was completely chartered and legal, not like Ollie North at all. And according to Bray, the sequence of physical effects we saw in the various assassination videos adds credence to the weaponized microphone theory, given that the motion is detected in the area of Kirk's microphone 0.33 seconds before the appearance of the neck wound in the torrent of blood. Bray's remarks regarding the necklace Kirk was wearing are interesting and seem to lend further credence to the weaponized microphone theory. The necklace was broken when it flew off Kirk's neck, and Bray suggested it was explosive charge that was responsible for severing the chain. Of course, there is a tie-in here because where have we seen this before? And this, of course, is with Mossad using explosive pagers and walkie-talkies against their enemies. And in the intelligence world, what Mossad is most known for is its assassinations as well. So I will come back later to Tina Peters and to the new DNI Bill PULTE and how he's tied in with NVIDIA data centers in homes and Muslims, Eiffel Tower, arson equals European civilization end. But I want to get to John without further ado. John, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So as I said, you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been on a lot of shows already, but I wasn't really, I'm not a news breaking show at all. I'm an intelligence analyst. And as time has gone by, what I've seen from your work is that it has become even more credible than it was. Am I right on that, or am I missing something?
Yeah, as I think it's just as we reconcile the data that we retrieve, be it through the court filings or more better quality videos or videos that weren't available to us at first, as they come available. Every time we get a new piece of information, it reconciles with the thesis, as opposed to throwing a kink in it or not aligning with it at all. It really, every bit of information we get, it just lends more to the possibility that this was not a ballistic impact that we witnessed. This was more than likely a high order explosive that was underneath his shirt. It's just the not only the visual evidence, but the audio evidence, and then the his actual physical reactions too. They all very much align with that thesis.
And would you agree with me that you are really doing the job of the FBI forensics lab?
Yeah, it's just beyond me how we have all this ability, especially the FBI. And we don't see any of this technology used to try to come to a rational conclusion of what we saw. We're just force-fed a narrative, and it seems like they use media manipulation and allow people to infer people's guilt instead of just building a case and allowing that case to stand on its own. It's just just little psychological tricks to allow people to alienate Tyler Robertson and make it very easy for them just to assume that he's guilty based on a little, it's like connect the dots. There's no cohesive line from one, the chain of custody of the key evidence. Yeah. It's all just pieced together, and they just allow us to infer that it ties all together neatly. But they never tell us the data or the evidence that they have that does that. They just allow us to assume that they wouldn't go through all these lengths unless they had it. But it's coming to reality. They're never going to show it because they don't have it. They're just going to continue on with what they have and allow us just to assume that he's guilty because the FBI says he is. Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think that is the key element, chain of custody. That goes back to my whistleblowing days, is there was no chain of custody on the weapons that went into Mexico. That's the whole point of a law enforcement investigation. So I think you're right on. But, what I also think today is the FBI is an intelligence organization with law enforcement functions, or as its storefront is a law enforcement organization, but it's really the cover team for the deep state's operations. In this case, it looks like Israel, Mossad, and CIA at least. But that's that's my feeling. I think you probably agree with that. Do you, or am I off?
Yeah, I mean the level of sophistication that we're dealing with. I mean, this can't be, obviously it's not a lone wolf. That never makes any sense. Just the fact that there was other people in the audience that, you know, were trying to take blame of it. Then we have, you know, people online talking about the event beforehand. There's no way it was a lone wolf, so we can mark that possibility off, and we can look at, you know, the speeds and the amount of energy that was displaced in the event, and it's not something that a person, you know, a civilian could make these sort of high order explosives. You know, this was a highly advanced, well designed, probably tested many times device. And it happened less than a year after we saw the Lebanese pager attack, which was very sophisticated. These were devices that were sold to, you know, a group of people that were highly suspect of these devices being modified or, you know, having spyware on them. And they had them scrutinized. They had electronic experts looked at them. They had bomb dogs smell them. They ran them through airport scanners, and they passed the test. They were using them actively. The walkie-talkies, they were using for almost 10 years before they detonated these devices. So it kind of shows the level of sophistication that they were able to achieve in that. This was like a cakewalk. You know, this was a microphone that hadn't, you know, it wasn't scrutinized. It was held by third parties. They flew around with it, so they didn't have it in their possession all the time. It was just the amount of opportunity they have to get just 5 minutes with that microphone. You could do all the modifications you needed to do to it, and it could be perfectly functioning for years after that. And it's not until that target opportunity arises that it can, you know, be detonated. And it makes it very difficult to really pin down when it was modified, who modified it. You know, innocent people handle it every day and use it and don't know that it's a weapon. So it makes it really difficult to track down who the party is involved. But, you know, the level of sophistication, it has to be a state actor. A non-state sponsored group wouldn't be able to achieve this level of sophistication.
No, totally agree with all of those statements. And I've often said, you know, you can have elaborate security measures, but all I got to do is get on the cleaning crew or bribe a cleaning crew member, and they're in there all night, you know, and they can download whatever, and we can crack it, you know, later on. So what you're saying about access to the microphone, although I think it was a different microphone than he normally used. Do I have that right? Or
no, it was actually an older brand microphone. It's a microphone that he has. You can kind of see the evolution of them using it and learning how to mount it. Like, it was the same microphone that was used, or it appeared to be the same microphone as far as from the outside. So, you know, they didn't appear to have no new equipment. It was kind of like, you know, just a normal production for them. Nothing was really out of the ordinary, other than a few small details. So, you know, as far as anyone on the crew of Charlie themselves, it would have been, there was no red flags for him to really be alarmed that something could have been going on.
So I've been inside as an intelligence officer. I've been inside the DIA's Toys R Us, later on as a contractor, Raytheon's bike shop. So I've gotten to go inside. You know, for those who don't know, that's, you know, when Bond goes to see Q and see all the cool, those are the shops. Those are cool shops to be inside. And I've been inside several of them, but I'm unfamiliar, other than the Israelis, of any intelligence organization leaving this kind of signature with the walkie-talkies or pagers. Am I missing something, or do I have that right?
It's kind of a new development because of drone warfare, these miniaturization of explosive charges, where, you know, traditionally you're having a warfighter or a large piece of equipment kind of deliver the charge. So there was no need to make it miniaturized. It was kind of like, make it as big as you can and it'll have a bigger range, more effectiveness. You weren't trying to like conceal it or make it where it's a very light payload. But with the advent of drone warfare, getting things small and getting things light and get them where they can be remotely detonated has become a priority. So we've seen everything miniaturize and get to a point where it can be remotely detonated by several different means, be it actual mechanical trigger on the device itself, via a fiber optic feed or a wireless feed. So, it's a part of the new paradigm of war that I think most people haven't really wrapped their head around. Like the way we fight war is different now. Like we're essentially in a world war now. We just don't recognize it because it's not like the other two that we've been engaged with. It's a much more undercover and allows economies of these countries to kind of continue to run as normal, while in the background there's all the same war fighting that we've seen in the previous two world wars are going on. It's just a new type of war, so we don't recognize it.
No, exactly right. I call that some of us call that fifth generation warfare. Doesn't look like warfare. Nobody's in uniform. And the first rule of war is know when you're in one. It's even difficult to know when you're in it. I think that the COVID democide by the government was exemplative of that. But that's interesting because back, I think the last time I was inside CIA was 2004, and the mechanical catfish and the mechanical dragonfly were passe even by then. But the miniaturization you're talking about was certainly done, but that was still I believe the Predator drone came out of CIA as well. So the explosive charges were still big, but the miniaturization had already happened. But the combination had not been put together. But then that leads us to Ukraine, I guess, where drone warfare is really advanced. But that leads us right back to the CIA. Oh, and also to Israel, again, because of the big connection there, Ukraine even being called the new Israel, and the Azov Nazis given the Ukrainians Tavor bullpup rifles, for example. Does that all make sense too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the motive of greater Israel is essentially what the motive of Charlie Kirk was an issue. He would have been a roadblock for that plan to continue to unfold at the speed that they would like. He's very eloquent, and he made it very clear that he was against very key aspects of that. So when you lie to the means, the motive, the mode, like it all starts to, you put all the pieces together, it becomes pretty clear that the very people that had the means and the technology and the sophistication to pull this sort of event off were the very people that had the most motive to kind of remove Charlie from the picture.
So can you get into walking us through your investigation, and maybe even if you're able to present some of the images that you've shown on X and other places?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you like a quick run of like how it developed, how it started. Like you, immediately I thought he had body armor on. So
good. I don't feel so bad.
It looked like we did a lot of ballistic testing with the panels that we were refurbishing, because obviously if you're going to do work on them, you want to make sure they're still perform. And so I got to see a lot of kind of ballistic tests, and immediately it looked like a soft panel attempting to catch a projectile. It deforms on the edges and kind of like cups in. And so the way his shirt moved, the first thing I thought was that it was a soft panel attempting to catch a bullet, and that it was like an edge shot, and it kind of ricocheted up. And
that's exactly what I thought. Oh, I feel so much better now. Yeah, I didn't know you had thought that initially.
Yeah, so I originally made my first pipeline to use the deformation of the panel to identify where the bullet struck, because the way the panel deflects and kind of deforms, it gives you an idea where the epicenter of the energy was. And so my first coding was to identify where the bullet struck the soft panel. And immediately when I started running it, I realized before I even got my first run in, I realized that he didn't have a soft panel on that day. We started getting high resolution pictures of him right before the event, and he's out in the event, throwing hats, and immediately sits down. There's no time for them to, change or anything. And you could just see through it was just a jersey knit shirt that he had. There's, even executive panels, they aren't that thin. They aren't that concealable. And it was obvious that the only thing he had on underneath his shirt was a necklace. And later the microphone, obviously. So then I already had the pipeline coded, so I just started running it, and it kept flagging at the area right under his collarbone, right underneath where that microphone was. And I noticed that the microphone clasp, which was very easy to see because it's a black rectangular clasp on a white shirt, it kind of took like a strange trajectory across his body, and it seemed to line up perfectly with the wound that appeared on his neck. Like there was a gap where you don't see the magnetic clasp, and then you see the wound on his neck appear. So my first intuition was that the magnetic clasp had come loose and impacted his neck and had just enough momentum to penetrate the soft tissue of his neck, which this is probably the most vulnerable area of your neck, around your jugular and the zone 2. The skin's as thin as your eyelid, and there's nothing but vascular tissue there. There's really nothing to protect you. So I knew that it was a very easy area for something to penetrate. Like it's, as far as like fragmentation, it's the most dangerous area for you to get hit by fragmentation. So I immediately started running maps to try to approximate the speed of that magnet, how fast it was moving. And, I was probably halfway into that when I realized that a new video angle came out where you could see the magnetic clasp still attached. So I kind of had to like reconfigure the data to see exactly what it was. So I knew that the trajectory of whatever the magnetic clasp was attached to was going in that general direction because the magnetic clasp was moving in that direction. And so then we had the mystery of his shirt collar that kind of lifts up across his face. It's one of the first things you see well before you see the neck wound, is that his shirt lifts up on the side of his face where the bullet supposedly impacts. And, I couldn't really reconcile those two energies, a linear force coming from, 5 to 9% above him and across his body, impacting his neck, causing his shirt to lift up. Cavitation is a force on fluids, and it wouldn't really make any sense that a fluid action and this that would be localized around his neck would cause his collar to lift up around his cheek. And then the more I looked at that, I realized that there was a actual physical object that was underneath his shirt that was causing it to lift up. So the first thing I during that same period of time, it became obvious that his necklace was blown off his head, where as the less compressed copies of the video started to come out, you could see better resolution. You could see that the necklace kind of goes up and around around the back, the side of his head. And it originates from the opposite side where the supposed bullet struck. And I couldn't really reconcile that too. So now I had 3 things I couldn't really reconcile with impact of a 30-06 to his neck. And really, if you add the wound appearance, the wound made no sense. Like there was no force splatter, there was no back splatter, there was no atomized blood. Like there's really no indication that it was a high velocity impact to an area full of vascular tissue. So I kind of had to, from those 4 physical evident points, kind of piece together what it could have been. And because I knew that the necklace snapped from the area around where the microphone was, and my pixel flow maps kept flagging the epicenter of movement as right underneath the microphone. And I knew that the magnetic clasp took the trajectory that was in the general trajectory that the wound would have been if they continued to move that way. And so it left me to investigate what exactly was attached to that magnetic clasp. And that's when I discovered that it was a wireless microphone. And immediately my brain went to the pager attack. So it's like, all right.
So the microphone was under the shirt.
Under the shirt. The only thing we see is the magnetic clasp that's holding it underneath the shirt. And if you look at video angles from earlier in the day, the microphone is 44 millimeters by 45 millimeters and 18 millimeters thick. It's quite bulky, and you can see it in his shirt. Like, it weighs his shirt down, and he's actually like moving it around a bit where it's a bit uncomfortable the way it's mounted kind of on its side, where it's not sitting on its face, it's sitting kind of on its side, so it's protruding out quite a bit on his shirt. And what I noticed is that as soon as the necklace snaps off his neck and we see the first bit of movement, we don't see the bulk of the case anymore. All we see is the magnetic clasp kind of moving around with just 20% of the bulk of the case left there. So instead of it being a 44 by 45 millimeter bulge underneath his shirt, now it's just 19 by 24 millimeter kind of bulge that doesn't have any thickness to it. It's pretty much just the thickness of the microphone clasp. And that actually allowed it to fold over on itself where you don't see it for a little while, but then it reappears from other angles. So now I had to reconcile that. So not only do I have the movement of the microphone, the breaking of the necklace, now I know at the exact moment that the necklace broke, something causes the case to basically breach and fail. And then, when we started to get the best angles from the actual original devices that recorded it, from Charlie's right side, they were original files off of iPhone 15 Pros, 1080p in 60 frames per second, which is really important because the higher frames per second allow us to get more frames of action. And then a 30 frames per second camera that was probably just 7 to 10 feet to the right of that 60 frame per second. So it's almost like a stereoscopic vision that we have, two identical cameras that are filming, to the left or right of each other. And using the data that I was able to gather from those, I was able to get really precise numbers of the amount of energy that we were dealing with. I was able to see fragmentation from the actual case of the microphone flying out and away from Charlie. I was able to see the link of the necklace fly out and away from Charlie. And they're all flying in radial directions out from the area of the epicenter where my pixel map shows that it has the epicenter of the movement, where the movement began and the most dramatic, fastest areas of movement are seen.
Can you put that? Can you?
Let me find exactly the video, and then I'll show you my first maps, and then kind of how I built from that. But the more I kept refining the code, the more that it kept getting really more and more honed in on the actual the areas that we could see. So the first code that I ran was a basically a slight modification of the code from MIT, which maps the flow of the pixels using arrows, and it kind of like it's a gradient pattern. So the more intense movement gets larger arrows, and they show you the general direction of the movement. I have that screen shared on there if you can pull it up. I don't think I can. Yeah.
Got it.
All right. So this is the first angle that kind of shows. The red circle is showing you the kind of the this was the rough draft of me having it pick the epicenter of movement from each from one frame to the next frame. So wherever it saw the pixels move the most from one frame to another, it would flag it with the red circle. But the lower resolutions, it wasn't as precise. But you could see immediately what becomes obvious is the text on the shirt, the freedom text on the shirt. At the first frame of movement, it takes like an arch where it's basically flat across his chest, and you see it immediately go from where we can see the heat map where it shows where the pixels were, and then we can see where the pixels are, and it's basically lifted up probably 5 to 6 inches across, and then you can see the reaction of his body where his arms go out, his hands go in, his knees immediately come together, and then his head kind of deflects back. And that gave me the data to show that this was his physical reactions show that it was a lethal event within the first few frames of movement. Like we're seeing catastrophic physical reactions here. This isn't reactions that we would expect from a 30-6 impact to the neck. That would be fatal, but it wouldn't have the immediate neurological reactions that we see here, especially his knees clasping together and his elbows going out. Like that's showing traumatic brain, a reaction. So, again, I had to reconcile that. Now his physical reactions aren't matching up with what we were seeing. And this is another angle. And so that angle also shows those peak, movements are right around that microphone area. And so it's whatever causes the microphone movement and the necklace movement also caused his collar to raise up. So, these side angles are the highest resolution. This is the 60 frame per second video, and it has a lot more data in it because it's 1080p and it's 60 frames per second. And this is the one that you can really see the necklace take the trajectory up and over his head. And so, that's the one that I really realized that his necklace moves at such a speed that it had to be directly within the path of the whatever the high energy discharge was. It was no way that it was like a secondary event. It had to be one of the first. And then this video came out, which this angle was recorded by the UVU, and this is a professional Canon, like a DSLR, like large framed a camera. So the quality of the audio and the video from it's a lot higher than the cell phones, which actually they're limited by the aperture size, and then the audio is obviously compressed. And this video angle saw a very dramatic collar stretch, and then we see this red area is showing you the area of the fastest, most dramatic movement. So it showed that not only did the movement originate from around the microphone, but the energy was displaced across his body. And that lined up perfectly with the collar lifting up across his face. And it's also the trajectory of the battery, where, we saw that battery go across his body. It was lagging. The internals of the microphone are basically the components that cause his shirt to lift up. And
let me ask a question. So the magnet flies off in his hole, basically.
The magnet stays attached. Basically, when the case breaches, the case, the whole sides of the case, the 18 millimeter sides of the case breach, and the whole internals of the microphone are ejected across his chest. And the only thing that stays attached are the clip and the clasp on his shirt.
So then it's a shape. It's obviously it's a shape charge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because we the rise times from the audio and the video frames, the only way you can explain, the how fast the audio goes from basically a baseline to full amplitude is a high order explosive, and the frequencies particularly show you that it was around a 10 millimeter diameter kind of orifice that the expansion came from. And so, when you look at the case of the microphone, it's big enough to fit a 10 millimeter by 28 millimeter kind of charge. And that happens to be the very size that's the most studied size right now for drone warfare.
10 millimeter equivocates to 357, close to that diameter, which is generally in most. I'm an old firearms instructor for a long time, is the best stopper, the best kinetic deliverer for speed and kinetics. So And what about the battery? You were saying something about the battery.
Yeah. So the shirt collar has a certain shape and color to it. I have analysis on it. When I identified the device, I immediately purchased the exact same model that he had. And it made it really clear when I got the microphone in my hand and I opened it up, I immediately recognized the color of the circuit board, where traditionally circuit boards, they have like a green solder mask on them. This particular model has a blue solder mask. And I knew that there was two different frames from two different angles where you could see this blue solder mask kind of seen in the collar of his shirt.
Really?
And yeah, so this is the analysis of it right here. So this is the outline of that. So using the manufacturer's specifications, I can take the magnetic class that we can see clearly and get a direct metric of the per pixel millimeter ratio, because I know the size of the magnetic clasp. Then I can look at the amount of pixels in the image, and it gives me a ratio. And that bulge that we see raise his shirt up is the exact size of the circuit board that's in that wireless microphone case. And so you can't see it in this image, but the next image of the collar, you can see just the corner of the circuit board sticking out from the collar, where it almost escapes the collar, but it runs out of momentum. The tension straight of the shirt kind of pulls it back down. But in those few frames, I was able to run analysis on the color of it, and it's the same. It's basically the same color shift, where it's just a blue color shift, and it's almost 2 points more color shift to the blue than we see from the other areas. So it's real difficult to really explain it away when you can see the actual, the color of the actual device. And then when it's up against his flesh, especially the white shirt and his warm, flesh tones, they make it really apparent. It doesn't look, I have the images up here, but it makes it really easy to see that, that was most likely the device. And then the shape of the wound on his neck, if you use the same technique that we use to kind of like pixel map the magnetic clasp and get an idea of its size compared to the wound on the neck is the exact same size as the battery. So now we have two components from inside the microphone case that match up with physical, evidence that we can see from multiple camera angles that match that size. And we know that the microphone case suffered a failure. We see fragmentation of it. We see the bulge is no longer there, and it breaks the necklace right below it. So again, as you reconcile all these things that we learn, it becomes pretty hard to ignore the fact that whatever that high energy event, it had to have epicenter around the microphone, if not within the microphone. And then using that same 1080p 60 frame per second video enhanced, you can see the shock wave go across his body. So you can see this is his flesh deformed. And so you see the necklace snapped across his kind of lifting up across his face, and it's moving at such a speed that it's blurred. But the most important detail is you see the force of the shockwave causing deformation of his face. Like, this isn't Charlie's normal chin.
Right.
His neck doesn't normally look like this. From his hair to his skin to his shirt, everything in and around that area reacts violently. And you can see it. It's almost a wave form, and it's gone in an instant. And so, the necklace was so much energy was put into that necklace in those first few frames that it's sent in a trajectory that lifts it up and over his head, around his body, and it ends up resting over his shoulder on the opposite side of his body. And so the amount of energy it takes just to break the necklace is beyond explanation with the official narrative. But then when we have this trajectory that is a blur through the first few frames, it's basically it has to be moving at over 300 meters per second in those first few frames for us to see nothing. This is the first frame that we see it clearly, and so we can see the clear snapped in, and then the clasp. So we know it didn't break at the clasp because we can see the clasp there, the bulge that's kind of in his hairline. And we know they only lifted on one side of his body because we see the necklace resting on the other side of his neck. So that energy was very much centered in that collarbone area where we see the snap. And the way his flesh reacts, the way his shirt reacts, everything kind of gives you the impression that whatever that energy is, it unleashes its force at such a speed that you can barely see it. And this is another really important frame here. One of the cameras is a 30 frame per second camera, and it captures the shirt at a bulge that's almost unexplainable. Like, the shirt, just the shirt, not his flesh, is stretched out for about, it seems at least 4 inches up to 6 inches. And the 60 frame per second camera doesn't capture this. It just captures a blur of movement. And so, for a 60 frame per second camera to only capture a blur and a 30 frame per second camera to capture the full extension, that means that this shirt movement, so we can see that blur on the back where it's just like a ghost, where you see where it originally is, and then there's just like kind of a ghostly blur where the shirt color extends out. We're looking at 5 milliseconds for this fabric to move that fast and be in between the shutter rates of these two cameras. And so, you really tie all this together, just the physical, what we saw through the videos, this movement was, beyond what you could explain with any subsonic explosive. So it's not the type of energy you receive from black powder. Like, this had to be, a C4 explosive and above, for it to cause this rate of movement that we see. And, this is the bulge that we can see clearly throughout the day. You see a large, 44 by 45 millimeter bulge under his shirt. And as soon as that necklace snaps, you can see it folds over on itself where you can't even see the magnetic clasp anymore. And that's impossible when you have, a 18 millimeter thick 44 by 44 millimeter case underneath the shirt that's still attached. You can't get it.
Let me ask a question, because you're putting out such great, but a ton of data. So you talked about I'm trying to think of the term. I think it's decorticate reaction of the body through the projectile going up into the brain stem, as opposed to the battery, which went through this likely subcarotid artery.
Yeah, I believe that the shock wave and the jet from the charge caused catastrophic internal injuries, and that cavitation wave from that Mach 7 cone penetrating his chest is what caused basically immediate cardiac arrest. And so what we're seeing there is basically his body's physical reaction from his heart and his lung cavities basically getting liquefied. And so that happens well before we even start to see the neck wound bleed. But it also
does the brainstem come into that?
The brainstem does, but with the brainstem damage, it would be held for a longer period of time. So when I first saw it, the general description of it matched with that sort of brainstem damage. But when you look at it closer, he doesn't hold that position. He immediately kind of loses rigidity of his body, where he basically goes limps and kind of slumps out of the chair. And so that's more akin to a complete cardiac arrest, where basically the upper chambers of his heart were basically just destroyed. So his blood pressure just immediately almost went to zero, and that explains a lot of the the jugular bleeding that we see later from that impact to his neck, where it doesn't even really seem to have a pulse to it. It's just kind of draining.
Right.
You know, it's almost like gravity draining, and it's deoxygenated. It's very dark and it almost looks clumpy. And you know, he just kind of like slumps and falls out of the chair, and as he's falling over, it starts to kind of come out. Where, you know, if you look at,
so cause of death is not exsanguination. Cause of death is destruction of upper ventricles of the heart, which is exactly where you want to hit.
yes,
Is that correct?
yes, exactly. And so, you know, I think that's, you know, why we didn't see the team, you know, they didn't really have to fight a lot of active bleeding. You don't see them when they're carrying them away. You don't see a pulsating bleeding. Like in reality, those vascular areas, we should see at least 30 seconds of the heart continuing to.
The team's trauma medical response was terrible.
Yeah, you know, again, reconciling what we're told from the official narrative to what we see physically, it just didn't match. And the more I really looked at the key details, if you look at even the fine details, you can see all his muscles twitch. And right in the first frames of where we see that shirt collar stretch, you know, before we even really see the necklace is still in movement, you see the muscles on his forearms and his hands, they all twitch and flex. But by the time that the necklace is halfway across his head, everything's completely relaxed and he's already starting to go limp. So the deeper I got into the kind of like medical literature of these type of traumas, the more I realized that, you know, it had to be a catastrophic internal injury that you basically, you know, took his pulse to almost zero. So, you know, Charlie it was fatal within the first few seconds. Yeah, that
was my conclusion too, having watched a lot of shooting videos as a primary fire instructor for DEA. You know, saying that he was, you know, hanging on is kind of like what they said with JFK. It's kind of hopium, not actual. But so, do you have a lot of questions? So you're saying the sound was not the gunshot; it was the explosive?
No, the sound is very interesting. That, you know, at this point, I was doing only the visual analysis on it. I didn't even get into the realm of the sound, because all the sound that we had up to this point while I was producing this analysis was from cell phone cameras. So it was really difficult to really understand what we were hearing because cell phones are compressed sound. And so when that Mach cone travels past, it's basically 5 to 10 milliseconds of just kind of distortion where everything's clipped out. So you can't really make sense of what you're hearing or what's going on. So, you know, I didn't really even get far into the analysis of the sound until we had the audio from that Canon camera, which is an uncompressed camera. It had 4 channels of audio. They had an external shotgun mic, and then the camera itself has basically a speaker or a microphone array on it. And so when I was able to get those uncompressed originals, I was able to do much better analysis on it. And, you know, that basically allowed me to go and take what I found there and make sense of what we saw. And basically what I found is that looking at the audio, it became clear that there was a near source, you know, low frequency event that was picked up by the cameras that were closest to Charlie.
Exactly the opposite of what a rifle shot from a distance would do.
Exactly. From a rifle shot from a distance, we should see, you know, a Mach cone, and then depending on the distance of that rifle shot and the speed of the bullet, there should be a muzzle blast that follows that. Well, what we had was, you know, a Mach cone that passes by, and then we have a low frequency event that originates from the area of the tent, and then the muzzle blast immediately follows it. And you know, it was very easy to detect that because the cameras are lined up all around the tent that day. And so these modern cell phone cameras, they have stereo recording on them. So even though the microphones are pretty close to each other, they still give you, you know, the sound arrives at one channel before it arrives at the other channel. So it gives you a general direction of where this acoustic phenomenon comes from. And I could take cameras from the right side of Charlie, and they would show that mock cone arriving, you know, from the right, like you would expect, and then, you know, kind of then arriving at the left channel. And then I could go to the opposite side of Charlie, and it would flip. But that low frequency event was balanced between the two channels. And that tells you that that audio, that acoustic event happened directly in front of these cameras, where that audio wave was arriving at both of those microphones at the same time. And then the muzzle blast would arrive right after that. And it would arrive from the left channel to the right channel, depending on the orientation of the camera. And so it was really hard to differentiate those, because the muzzle blast was arriving right after that low frequency event that was originating from where the tent source was. And so it wasn't until I got the UVU source, which was further away from the tent, that it allowed me to have enough delta in between the muzzle blast and the arrival time of that low frequency event from the tent, that I could really identify the type of frequency that we were dealing with and the rise time of the frequency. And the rise time is basically like how fast it reaches its highest amplitude. So
is there a rifle shot?
Yes, there was absolutely a rifle shot, and the rifle shot was you know, from anywhere between 130 to 157 meters away from the tent area. And the reason that we don't know exactly that difference, that number, is because we don't know exactly the speed of the bullet. We know the speed of sound. That's a very, you know, you can't, you know, the temperature, the elevation, and the general weather that day, you know exactly what the speed of sound was. So we know how fast the muzzle blast was traveling, but what we don't know exactly is how fast the bullet was traveling. So that's why
that's a great reason to show why they redid the entire area, even the structures, is because they don't know where the bullet went.
Yeah, and they can't identify where all the fragmentation went either. We can see from these cameras there was fragmentation going in all directions. So even one piece of fragmentation found from that microphone can be tested for these high order explosives. And these are chemicals that are, you know, synthesized through 20 to 30 steps. They're not found in nature, and they don't degrade very fast. So, you know, it would be very easy for someone to get even a single piece of fragmentation and send it to gas chromatography or HPLC, and they would be able to find that peak. And it's a peak that you can't find in nature. So it would be a fingerprint of a high order explosive that you couldn't explain away any other way. So, you know, it was key for them to pull up every blade of grass from underneath that event, because there was no way you would ever be able to find every bit of fragment that was, you know, spread out that day from that event. And
the request, I believe, came from the FBI, or the order.
Yeah, and within a day, they were, or within 48 hours, they were pulling the grass up, and the FBI was overseeing it. It wasn't that it was just, you know, requested and they just handed it over. They were actually sitting there watching it be done. So, you know,
just like at Crooks, hosing off the roof, and just like at Waco, bulldozing everything into the fire.
Yes, exactly. The less possibility of something that they can't explain, the better. You know, it's better just to leave it unexplained, and than to have to, you know, have some you know, some hard evidence that doesn't really line up with their narrative.
Can you show the gas coming up, the colored gas coming up from the underneath the shirt?
Yeah, so that's what this is right here. And let me see. Yeah, let me get you the actual video. I have this is the first one I found. So this was slight, and you have to see it in motion to really see it. But this this kind of the one furthest on the right is the one where you can see it the most. But seeing the frames before it and after is really the key. And then the frames from the back that Candace Owens released really show it the best. I have that on my drive, and it's a lot more dramatic from the back view. You can see a much larger area where it's kind of like casted out. And then, you know, the frames before it, there's nothing there. It's a very clear view. And then, you know, immediately as the first movement of the shirt, you know, kind of unfolds, you see the distortion and then the discoloration, and it's the exact kind of it's not even really smoke. These high order explosives, they burn really clean, so they just kind of lean like a whitish gray puff. And because they dissipate and burn so fast, it's only there for a moment and then it's gone. And that's kind of what we witness with this. And so you can see this is both the angles side by side. That front angle,
yeah, that is just really, I think, telling and amazing when I saw that.
Yeah, and it's the timing of it too. It's a one frame on a 60 frame per second camera is roughly 17 milliseconds, and is one frame before the shirt just expands and we see rapid movement all over the place. We see from the very same trajectory that we see the battery and the internals of the microphone travel, we see smoke traveling that way. And so if you imagine that case breaching as that explosive charge goes off and the pressure causes the case to breach, it's going to open on one seam of the case, and then the gas is going to escape from that seam. And then in the internals of that microphone, the components of the microphone are going to follow that same path. And that's exactly what we see. So, you know, again, it's just another piece of evidence that makes it really difficult to really ignore. And then we have the fragmentation. So this is from the bottom of the floorboard of the SUV that took Charlie to the
yeah,
hospital.
I wanted to get to that.
Yeah.
So is that coming from underneath the shirt, or is that coming?
Yeah. So basically what I discovered in the same model and make microphone that Charlie had, I purchased, and I, you know, controlled, kind of destroyed the face of it where I could still collect all the pieces. And these pieces, when they get close to fabric, they just stick to it. It's like Velcro, where the jagged pieces of glass, they basically, it's like, you know, any like fabric that has like a hoop type structure, like jersey knit or the carpet on the automobile. Once that jagged glass hits it, it's almost like Velcro. It sticks to it. It's like a fish hook. It's really, really difficult to get it to move. So, you know, that explosive force stretched his shirt out, and then those fragments got dispersed across the inside of his shirt, and then he, you know, falls to the ground or is kind of tossed to the ground. And then when they lift him to the SUV, they have his shirt lifted up like an accordion. So
that's where they fall out on the ground.
Yeah. And so when they get him, where we're seeing these pictures here are in between the captain seats of that SUV, and they basically pulled his body across those captain seats. So we're seeing the bottom of his shirt would be in between the two captain seats. So, you know, as they were, you know, manipulating them, getting them in the car and moving his shirt around, these pieces were basically falling out.
And what did the FBI team do for this? Nothing. Right?
Nothing. Yeah, they took pictures of it, and then they allowed his security team to go retrieve their items from it. So it's like, not only did they fail to really document it, but they allowed the chain of custody of the crime scene to get contaminated with people that potentially, in a real investigation, you would separate all those people apart. You would question them all, you know, separately.
You got all these cell phones recording it too, so
yeah,
everybody go too. So
yeah, you would want to make sure that all their stories were straight. You wouldn't allow any of them to, you know, go back to the potential crime scene and retrieve some of their electronic devices, like that, all that would be evidence. This is that hump that I was telling you about, that that happened in between the frames, the shutter speeds of a 60 frame per second camera and a 30 frame per second camera. So we're looking at like sub 5 millisecond movement of this shirt going from a resting position on the back of his shoulders, basically, to this extremely stretched out collar area. And the movements that follow it afterwards, it immediately relaxes back down. So, we see this same moment, we can see the necklace start to take its trajectory up and over its head. So again, like we're tying all these energies together. We see the microphone is moved from its original position. We see distortion in the front of the collar from a shockwave. We see the necklace is broken already, taking its trajectory, and we see the back of his shirt has taken this dramatic stretch. And so, you can't, the only way you can reconcile all the extremely fast, high energetic movements is that they had to be from the same source. Like we couldn't have multiple sources of high energetic movement from the same area that aren't tied together. And so again, like none of these three events that we're witnesses in this single frame can be explained by a rifle impact to the opposite side of the neck.
And did you do anything? Were there enough other folks debunking the 30-06 rifle that you didn't have to worry about it?
Yeah. As soon as I ran the maps and I saw the epicenter was on the opposite side of his body and underneath his shirt, I immediately knew that in my mind, I think as an operator, I put myself in their shoes. I could see this event was probably planned as a 30-06 impact to the chest. And then this explosive charge would be a lot more plausible to explain, all the movements that we saw, the physical reactions, like it would all reconcile much better. Matter of fact, if we didn't see the neck wound and they told us that Charlie was shot with a 30-06 in the chest, I wouldn't have looked twice at it. I would have just been able to explain all the abnormalities around the event by the power of a 30-06 impact to the chest. I wouldn't have looked twice at it. It's the neck wound that didn't reconcile with the weapon that really made me go back and keep going deeper and deeper. And when the epicenter of the energy is under the shirt and they're telling me he was shot in the neck, and the majority of the movement of the shirt happens before we even see any bleeding from the neck, there's just no way my rational mind could reconcile that and just take it as face value. So
you're saying it went wrong?
Yeah, absolutely.
The neck wound never should have happened.
Yeah. And, if you look at it as, an unforeseen consequence of their target opportunity, the target opportunity was the microphone. The microphone provided a device that had a wireless connection. It had ample size inside of it that they could put this sort of high energy explosive in it. And it didn't have a great, control mechanism. It was handled by third or fourth parties. It was thrown in storage when they weren't doing events. So there's plenty of opportunity to get access to it.
Sorry to interrupt, but even if it had stayed within the chest cavity, the angle of explosion would not have justified. There's no exit wound that there would be with the 30-06 anyway.
Right. And so it would still be weird, but at least you could reconcile a lot of the movement and the energy. At least the epicenter of the energy could be reconciled by a chest shot. It'd still be odd. It would still be hard to explain, but it'd be a lot easier to explain than a 30-06 impact to the neck showing a rectangular wound that, has delayed bleeding and no exit wound. And then you also have to explain a necklace breaking, a microphone case shattering, and the strange shirt movement. So, again, it's just all stipulation on my part, but, it made a lot more sense to me that the plan would have been to explain away the means through the sheer energy displaced in his chest, and the neck left him with, it was a single shot. So you can't have two different events from a single shot. So they had to pick one or the other. And because the neck wound was so, apparent and grotesque, that, they had to ride with the neck wound. And, that's just the strangeness of all the explanations that we've had since then have just been a pivot to try to recover the narrative of the operation and kind of just make light of all the other things that we saw, the shirt movement, the necklace breaking, the microphone, case breaking. That just doesn't ever get mentioned. And, we just get more details about the other things, unnecessarily, colorful details about the neck wound and steel bones and things like that. And I think that's
Charlie's miracle neck that saves everybody.
I think that was just, narrative that had to be made on the fly. And, that's why I would be very surprised if we ever see an autopsy. And if we do see an autopsy, it'd probably be very heavily redacted because it's just going to be very difficult to anyone to explain it. And that's why the prosecution should be calling a ballistic expert to explain how this wound is consistent with a 30-06 impact from the area that we saw. But we won't see that because any expert won't, they'll be throwing their career away to go up there and say that this is consistent with a high velocity impact to the neck, because it's not. So it's the things that they don't say in the prosecution that's the most telling. And, it just leads you to believe further that, this was a botched operation, and we're just seeing them kind of in free fall, trying to use the weight of the state and the power of the media propaganda just to piece it together and rush it through.
Their corruption makes them incompetent, as I always like to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you have, especially for the people that, are actually in control of these type of events, they have there's 12 layers of insulation between, the players that actually, doing this, that are putting themselves at risk, and them. So, if Kash Patel's career is ruined about this, it doesn't make them any difference. It doesn't really matter to them. If field agents go down because of it, it doesn't really matter to them. They're insulated. These are just pawns in the pieces of the game that they're playing. And it doesn't really, as long as they can continue to keep their trajectory of their plan, which hindsight, we can look back at now, their plan was, to attack Iran and continue on with the Great Israel Project. And Charlie would have been a very difficult party to deal with if that was going on and he was still out making his podcast, being active in the environment. And so, it's worth them sacrificing some agents and the integrity of the FBI for them to continue on with their greater goals.
Somebody's asking what triggered the device. Would that be the drones, the mini drones?
No, that's a very good question. And that's something that I've really hammered in on. That model of microphone happened to have an ARM processor in it, which the reason it's the Pro model is because it's made to have millisecond timing so it can sync with the camera. So that microphone's made to give you a better quality audio with a professional camera. So the receiver of it plugs into your camera, and then it gives you precise millisecond frame rates so the audio matches perfectly with the frame rates of the camera. And so using that same chipset that's already on the microphone, you can have it basically pick up a acoustic trigger, which would the Mach cone would be the perfect acoustic trigger because it's a very unique frequency. Its amplitude is very high and its rise time is very high. So the likelihood of you having a false detonation is very low. And
what's a Mach cone?
A Mach cone is the frequency that comes off the tip of a supersonic projectile.
So the rifle shot was the trigger?
Yes, the bullet passing by the microphone and the frequency that comes off of that supersonic bullet provided a unique frequency. And if you look at the time delay between that Mach cone passing by and the detonation is right in the window of what it would take that processor to analyze that sound, process it as a positive trigger, and send it to a detonation. And then the delay time of the detonation to actually take place. It's all within the window that we see that the acoustics, that's the best evidence that we have of the timing of the event is the acoustics from it. And so it all falls within the window of the processing power that was already in that microphone. So
what's the vicinity got to be of the mock cone? Where
so
do the guy have to shoot?
30 feet. As long as it's within 30 feet of the microphone, it would reach over 100 decibels, which is like.
So then where could he, with all those crowds, with all those people around, is it over the shoulder there into the grass?
That is something that I had to speculate on until I found another frequency in all of the cameras that are close to it. There's a 4940 hertz frequency, which was just a weird. It's a very consistent. It has a very fast rise time, and it's almost a perfect frequency until it drops off. It doesn't vary very much, and I couldn't explain what it was until I started to find. I found about just by chance a video that I was looking at that was basically the sound of a ballistic gel impact. That cavitation, the bullet enters a ballistic gel, it makes a certain diameter hole, and then it causes a cavitation, a cavity, and then that cavity vents through that hole, and it whistles. And so I was able to basically take that whistle, led me to do the math of it, which is it's a very defined formula of the diameter of a hole and the amount of gas that blows through it makes a certain frequency. It's just like designing an instrument. And so a 30 caliber hole in ballistic gel makes a 4940 hertz frequency. And that was just on math. I had no real world examples on that. But then I started to go through YouTube, because I realized that YouTube's mostly recorded with cell phones, and there's so many people shooting ballistic gel on YouTube that I might be able to find a video that recorded this frequency. And the very first video I found was a person shooting a 30 caliber air rifle, which was very beneficial because I didn't have the sound of it was a air rifle with a compressor on it. So the actual shot was very quiet. So the only audio that was really picked up was that frequency from the vent through that 30 caliber impact in the ballistic gel. So I was able to take those recordings, which were 3 impacts on that recordings. I ran them through my software, and they matched perfectly with the recordings that we were picking up during the event. Then I found multiple other videos of 300 Blackout, which is a very popular round that's come out. That's a 30 caliber round also. And often it's subsonic and suppressed. And, a lot of people were testing the ballistics of it because it was a new round. So there's literally hundreds of examples of people shooting ballistic gel with it. And every example I ran had the same frequency within 5% of the frequency that I found. So then I was left.
The suppressed round would still give the acoustic.
Yeah, but because it's a function of the diameter hole in the ballistic gel and the cavitation. And so even though the suppressed round was moving at a slower rate of speed, it still had enough energy to cause the ballistic gel to cavitate, which caused the gas to expand and then have to vent out of the only.
But where's so I'm confused. Where the bullet has to be shot to activate, it has to impact
ballistic gel. Yeah.
Impact. It's the impact. It's not the traveling.
No, it's not the traveling. It's the impact of ballistic gel that causes.
So then where do you theorize the round went near him?
I was left with a question of that. And then, there's a lot of crazy analysis that's been done on this event. And one of the ones is the van. There's a black van that's parked to Charlie's right that's underneath the kind of walkway, the overpass that's above them. And people noticed that literally seconds before the shot, a guy opens the hatch of that van, and then immediately after the shot, he closes the hatch of the van. And then when you go and look at images earlier in the day, you look in the back of that van, and it's just a bunch of Pelican cases stacked up. All the chairs are folded down, and there's just a bunch of shapes that you can't make out you know, anything about it. And I thought it was just really like hocus pocus, you know, more, you know, just noise to the event. But when you go and look at the actual timing and you look at the individual that opens that van, that he opens the van door and he immediately almost runs around the van, and he's the first person to react to the rifle sound before you can look at anyone in the crowd. He's the first one to jump from the rifle sound, where everyone else has the normal delay. It's like he was anticipating that he was from opening the van door, he made it around the van to the driver's door.
No, as somebody who has jumped out of a lot of raid vans, done a lot of surveillance in surveillance vans, and also, hypothetically speaking, you can cover with a sniper rifle. You don't even need a suppressor if the van itself, if the interior of the van is suppressed. If you've got stuff around, you've got material inside there to cushion. So that makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't even have, if you had already used that van previously for things like that, then that would be a no-brainer. It'd be easy.
And it provides them a perfect, you know, I think the Butler PA event showed that, you know, the level of audio quality on cell phones and the how prominent cell phones are, that they were going to have a lot of people recording the event, and that, you know, if you really wanted to make it convincing, you needed that mock cone traveling across the event. Like, it would be something that's really easy for people to go and pick up on, more so than the muzzle blast, because the mock cone is the first arrival of the event. You know, it's the first.
Cullen's audio work on Butler likely shows a suppressed 300 blackout from the window below.
Yeah, exactly. And
so you're starting to see you're starting to see, you know, a similarity between the events.
Yeah, and so, you know, they needed to have that be as realistic as possible, because they knew people would pour over the audio and analyze every detail of it. So, you know, having ability for that mock cone to pass right past Charlie and end in a, you know, a discrete, you know, vehicle that's controlled by TPC. It's a TPUSA vehicle. So, you know, it wasn't a vehicle that was, you know, going to be, you know, have a third party be able to get access to it. And then what I think more telling, that I didn't really realize immediately after the event, they shuttle everyone around that vehicle. They pull the gates down and they're literally waving people in. So it's like the evidence of that vehicle is completely tainted by everyone in the crowd. They go and touch it and they're huddled around it. So, you know, even if you were to be able to pin down that van had something to do with it, it's tainted evidence, because there's 300 people that were sitting there putting their hands on it and rubbing on it and, you know, hiding behind it. So, you know, any of the parties that would have been involved in, you know, the closing or the opening of the door or setting the ballistic gel up inside of it, there's no evidence to be able to tie them to it, because you had everyone around that event, around that van, and nobody's going to look in the van full of audio equipment and be able to pick out a ballistic gel block and be like, oh, look, there's a gel block in there. Like, that had something to do with this. Like, it was just beyond explanation. So much so that I was deep in the weeds, and I actually found the frequency of the ballistic gel, and I still didn't put it together until there was just so many videos done about that van door opening and closing, because the timing of it was just within seconds of the shot. You know, it's just really hard to explain that.
That is genius, John. I mean, all your work is extraordinary, but that is literally genius. I got to say.
Yeah.
Civilian investigators have really replaced the whole point of the FBI. The FBI is irrelevant at this point.
We have such good data. Like, you know, you can run you don't need a super computer to run analysis anymore. We all have supercomputers. The amount of power that it takes to do these things that even 10 years ago only state institutes would be able to do. If you have the intuition and you have the know-how and the curiosity, you can go and find out how to do it yourself. Like, there's the gatekeepers on knowledge and you know, expertise. They're they're gone. You know, if you have the willingness to dive into a subject and the ability to kind of comprehend what you're reading, then you know the stars are the limit. You can really achieve anything you want now. And so it's provided a very dangerous landscape for people that want to, you know, do these type of operations. The level of scrutiny that you're going to face is higher than ever.
Well, what I always say is you're really turning the claymore. You know, in Vietnam, the NVA would come in. It's Viet Cong actually would sapper climb under the wire and then turn the claymores around so that when we set them off, they blow on us. Really, you're turning the claymore on them, which is, of course, what we're trying to do: build the resistance legally, morally, ethically, and non-violently. Although the government and the left does so all the time. Another question is, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but it just occurs to me, were the charges in the pagers and the walkie-talkies shaped as well, or is this the next level of that technology? Is that, in fact, were those simple, you know, regular radiant explosions, or do you not know that, or were they
They were not shaped charges. They had to be concealed. So they were made to, the pagers were hidden in like a AA style battery, where basically they took a few layers of the battery cell and replaced it with the high explosive, and they were directional, but they weren't shape charged. And the walkie-talkies, we really don't know much about the walkie-talkies. There's still a mystery of how they even detonated the walkie-talkie.
So the roundness of the battery acts like a barrel.
Yeah, exactly. That's what gave it the kind of directional force that it has. And
now, is that what happened with Charlie's mic, or is that just the pagers?
No, I believe Charlie's mic was a direct implication of the drone technology. That 10 millimeter by 28 millimeter shape charge is something that specifically has been designed for drones, and that just happens to be able to fit in that microphone case. And that is about the amount of energy that I mapped that we see displaced. We're only seeing the waste energy of the shape charge. You know, they're 90% efficient at delivering energy in one direction. What we see with the case breaching and the movement of his shirt is the waste energy from it, and that maps to be about a perfect amount to the amount of charge, like a little over a gram, under 2 grams of high order explosives. And these,
so there's no projectile.
No projectile. It's just a hot gas. They're basically collapsing a liner and turning it into a hot gas. And so, you know, you could have it where it leaves fragments of metal. You could have it, but the main, you know, force is just Mach 7 gas. So it penetrates just by sheer speed alone.
I can just hear him saying, "And there's no bullet." I can just hear him.
Yeah, and it happens so fast that it's difficult for most cameras to even capture. So, you know, like I said, it was a target opportunity. Technology has moved to a point where it's small enough they could fit it in there, and it's very hard to detect because, you know, even when I understood it, it was hard for me to understand how fast it could unfold, that it could be in between the shutter frames of a camera. Like it's faster than what most people can imagine. So it's really hard for you to wrap your hand around like what you're witnessing when you do see it.
So the device used against Charlie is the next level. That we haven't seen that anywhere else. Is that right?
We're probably seeing it on in drone warfare in Ukraine. I'd say we're probably seeing it daily in Ukraine, and some of these and these drone attacks, especially drone attacks that are attacking like armored vehicles and things like that. When they're just attacking personnel, they're probably just using like a radial frag. But when they're going and trying to penetrate armor, I almost guarantee you it's this same 10 by 28. It's just, you see it in paper after paper after paper. They do their best not to disclose the details on it, but they've done enough research in and around that size that it shows you that is the form factor that they're most interested in.
So the drone is intercepting the soldier or whatever.
Yeah, these drones are actually made to be anti-drone and then anti-personnel carrier. So, you know, actual personnel carriers that have armor on them, these drones are actually able to penetrate, like, not so much tank armor, but like ballistic armor that would be made to stop, high caliber, high power rounds.
And the Army was just recently playing with it, dropping a grenade. It was almost cartoonish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that level is like, they're showing us that because that's what they want us to think, that the level that they're at. But they're well beyond that. If you really
Ukraine was saying, yeah, we'll share our drone technology. Well, they're getting it from CIA, who's getting it from DARPA.
Yeah. And they're probably 2 to 3 decades ahead of what we think the cutting edge technology is.
So obviously, I agree. You agree that it's likely Mossad with CIA access and FBI cover. But it's certainly nation state or multiple nation state. Certainly not any one individual could pull anything off like this.
Yeah, I would say during the event, it would be harder for me to say that. But in hindsight, seeing how world events have unfolded since then, I would say with a high probability, those would probably be the actors.
So is there one predominant? Like I say, Mossad is known for this kind of stuff. And
yeah,
will you agree with that?
Yeah, it's right in their playbook. And, not only historically, but, just within the last year and a half, I don't think there's been an event that they've been more proud of than the pager attack. So, they probably couldn't wait to replicate it in a new form or fashion. And it sends a message too. You have to think about these electronic devices are in everyone's, whether, a person of political stance has his devices secure, his family may not have all their devices secure. So it sends a message that allows, the influence that they have afforded themselves to continue. And if anything, it adds weight to it, because any one of our devices could be turned into a weapon against us, and there'd be little or no recourse that we could have. They could explain it by 1,000 different ways that would sound more rational than, electronic device that's been tampered with.
No, I started off in PsyOps in SOCOM back in '85. And what people don't understand about sniping is, the sniper gets the target, but there's a force multiplication psychological operation that goes on as well, because you shoot one guy and you pin down a battalion. Or with the JFK assassination, the message is clearly, hey, if we can get him, we can get you. So step in line and shut up.
Yep.
And that's the same message here to a degree, I think, although it was more desperation because they couldn't get Charlie to change his mind about which he had just done with Israel. But the psychological effect, the force multiplication of the psychological effect is much more powerful. It's like that, even though it's not a sniper. I guess maybe you could call it a sniping.
It's the same psychologically. It's the same effect. Yeah.
Ashley, for example, I always say Ashley Babbitt was sniped with a handgun.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a long gun to do sniping. But I think the effect has actually done the reverse. It is just like the early persecution of the Christians by the Romans. It's actually building resistance.
Yes.
And I'm a Christian. I'm prejudiced because I'm a Christian chaplain, but I don't know if you agree with that or not.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that, just the fact that the necklace, his cross necklace was the key to kind of unwinding part of the operation. It's God's hand.
That's very true. Yes.
Yeah. The Holy Spirit won't be undone. God is the best of planners. So it doesn't matter how much you conspire, like he will find a way to get to the truth to his flock.
Yeah. They do not understand God. They don't understand the Holy Spirit. They don't understand history. They don't understand human nature, especially they don't understand fallen human nature, or else they would not have done this.
Yeah.
Because they're like, like Tucker said, I know, we'll kill him. That always works well.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Like what they thought, of course they thought that with Yeshua as well. Was there any attached, do you put anything to the drones that Cullen was seeing, the high-speed miniature drones there, since you've talked a lot about drones? I'm sure you're aware of that, right?
Yeah, aware of it. I've ran kind of like the same sort of audio analysis that I did for the bullets and things. I went and researched all the videos I could find of drones.
Wow.
The propellers have a very unique frequency. Like I could take the sound of a drone, I could tell you how many props it has, the rotational speed of the props. I can tell you a lot about it. And the event itself didn't have any drones close to Charlie. They weren't picked up on any of the cameras, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have a direct, causation in it. I just don't know what that is. And so, it's like I try to tie everything to something that can be measured and replicated and explained. So the drones are like something that we have an idea that was there. We just can't really piece it together. There's nothing there for me to reconcile. So I haven't really approached it.
Dankster has theorized that the drones were there to map the crowd reaction to a violent event. Have you heard about that?
No, I could totally see that though. This is the type of like it's the AI, machine learning, machine vision.
Yeah, because you can't fake that. You can't say, okay, now act like somebody got shot. It's because the physiological and psychological effects of a zero-sum confrontation, where you void yourself, where you get a synaptic startle response, adrenaline dump, tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, all that stuff. You can't fake that.
It's involuntary. It's involuntary, and you can map it out. So it's very much a science, and it's very something that that they're very interested in. So I imagine the metrics of their reaction alone was something that was valuable data for them.
Wow. Well, that's So that's another piece there. So it's all really coming together. And I guess they thought that, no one would ever figure it out because they're so smart. Tie in, because I automatically tie in the golden pager that Netanyahu gave Trump is, hey, we can get you too.
Exactly. It's that the psychological pressure that they were able to create through that one event. It's going to pay dividends for them. And not only do they have their means of blackmail, but if they can't blackmail you, then they'll just intimidate you. So, it gives them, it just increases their ability to leverage our own politicians to their bidding. And, if you look at the actions, it seems to be working pretty well for them.
So, my first story was talking about Congress to integrate U.S. and Israeli military. It's really already integrated. They're all over the place, but they want to make it official. I think that, to me, that smacks of desperation. Is, hey, it's official because resistance is building and people are becoming aware of not only American Christian evangelical Zionism, but Jewish Zionism, just as a lot of Israelis are becoming aware of that. Does that make sense to you, or am I?
No, absolutely. And their next target is a NATO member. So, Turkey is on the list. So, for them to be able to engage Turkey, they need an alliance beyond NATO with America for it to really take fruition. And they work 6 months in advance. So we're seeing, their actions now make sense in 6 months from now. So, it wouldn't be surprised to me that, the hot war with Turkey starts within 6 months of them really, solidifying this agreement to merge our military forces.
And remember, everybody, I've published this on my Substack. I've done sermons, ChristChaplaincy.com, Jeffrey Prather Substack, is Greater Israel was fulfilled at the end of Joshua. God gave them every promise, and it says so right there. And then they blew it yet again, as they always did. So there's no biblical scriptural basis for Greater Israel, especially from a bunch of secular, non-religious Greater Israelists, Likud Party and Netanyahu and the rest. That was, I don't know if you're familiar with that scripture, but it's right at the end of Joshua. It's all given to them and they lose it again.
Yeah.
So that's
just like their Messiah has already come, but they denied him. So.
Exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. Well, this has really put the pieces together for me on a level that, your work is genius. But I got to ask you, because I've been targeted for a long time for my whistleblowing. Even recently, I got a nasty gram from the government. But I always say that they're afraid of me. I'm not afraid of them anymore. But you got to watch yourself. Have you been under any scrutiny or pressure, or do you not want to talk about that?
Yeah, we've had some issues. It's definitely, luckily me and my wife, we own our own business, but they can't go after my job, but they can definitely make it difficult for our business. I've had some insurance canceled for no reason at all. I've had difficulty getting that insurance replaced, but luckily I'm in Oklahoma. It's a, Choctaw territory. It's kind of a nation within a nation. So there's a rebellious nature of the people around me, and we're good, God-fearing, blue-collar working folks. So luckily the community, we take care of each other, and we've been able to work through it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Oklahoma Indian Territory, as well. And I'll tell you, having gone through this since, it started in 2004 for me, and the DOJ and the DEA came after me, and I was, slandered on the internet for over a decade, particularly by one obsessive troll. I can now look back and see God was preparing me to tell the story. At the first Clay Clark event, my wife walked up to General Flynn and said, "You know what you just went through with the FBI? My husband went through a decade before with the DEA, and God has prepared you for this." So, if I can do anything, or offer any prayers or mentorship, don't hesitate to reach out. But I can tell you that God's preparing you, and you'll come out on the other end. It's not fun. I asked my Bible teacher, like after the second or third government attack, "Why am I going through this?" He goes, "You're being tempered." I thought I already was tempered. "You're not tempered enough." "Well, what do I got to do?" "You got to sit in pain." I said, "Oh, great, thanks." But he was right, and I can see that God was preparing me so that I could, tell that story and say, this is a template they pull out, they throw at you, and if you are faithful, you'll come out the other end. So, fabulous work, and prayers and kudos to you and your family.
Thank you.
So where would you like people to? Already said it, but you please tell them where to follow you as well.
Yeah, if you all my analytics, all my analysis is on followtheepicenter.com. It's my means to protect the data regardless of the media censorship. It's my own website, so they can't delete it. And then me and my wife's company, we make self-care products and beneficial beverages, and that's at BlueMountainFarmOK.com. And it's farm grown. We work and live. That's what you're seeing in the background is our production facility. We moved to Choctaw territory, not knowing anyone, started a farm stand. We came out here to serve the community because it was an underserved, poverty-stricken community. And, we've been received graciously, and we've been blessed with everyone supporting us through all this, and we've been able to continue to grow. And every dime we make, we put back into it, and we want to just do good works and see people thrive and raise happy, healthy families. And so anything we can do to be a part of that, that's our goal, that's our mission.
Amen. Yeah, we moved to Oklahoma about 4 years ago, and then we had a house fire last year, and all our neighbors showed up uncalled. Neighbors I didn't even know showed up and moved all our stuff and took care of us. And it turns out, if you love your neighbor well, your neighbor loves you back well. How about that?
Absolutely.
How about those Christic commandments?
Yeah.
But, thank you so much for coming on. It has been really enlightening. You are a genius. And I am sure much of this inspiration is from the great Holy Spirit through Haggadah. So keep up the great work. And if I can do anything, I will send you, the show here shortly and publish it on Patreon and Locals and also your sites as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless. Christ is risen. God bless.
Christ is risen. Maranatha. Okay, so there was a really great show with John Bray. Really explained a lot. And remember, go to beready123.com, beready123.com. You get your Iridium 9555 phone free for 24 months. but they have a lot of other good stuff there. They have EMF beanies, they have generators, they have Faraday bags, all kinds of other good stuff to get there as well. And just coming in today was our coffee, StayBrewedCoffee.com. This is night and day. We just had run out. I was like, oh, when's it coming in? Great Christian Constitutionalist family. And you can go to TeamAmericaCoffee.com get Team America Coffee at 20% off, or you can just go to StayBrewed.com, or you can go on JeffreyPrather.com/shop and get Prather private label as well. And I've got my Stay Brewed mug today. Been decaffeinated for a couple of days. I guess that's a good fasting, but those are already really good. Oh, you get School Gal. This is worth hearing again and will. Good. Hegeman, fascinating cast today. Yes, very, very well said as well. So just to cover a couple of other things, Tina Peters was released from prison on Monday. And her sentence was commuted. You know, Trump commuted her as well, but he didn't really have the authority because it's a state case. But the conviction was for allowing an affiliate of MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell unauthorized access to Dominion voting systems to search for evidence of 2020 election fraud. So they commit election fraud, then they put her in jail for election fraud. But her release has been really important to understand because the resistance is building. The release, along with the January 6ers who remain unrepentant of the truth, is highly significant. The deep state desperately wants the public to believe that elections were not rigged and January 6th wasn't an FBI false flag. Fake news pundits proclaim it, court sentences confirm it, but the public is not buying it. And as history has always shown, oppression leads to greater resistance. The message is clear. You can imprison our bodies, but not our minds. Resistance is building, and so is non-participation. This is critical to understand. The government can be governed by consent or by force. Because America is armed, the deep state prefers consent via propaganda, psyops. But the psyops are failing daily. This is vital. Since the COVID psyop works so well, fool me once, shame on you. So that's the real significance there of the Tina Peters release, is resistance is continuing to build, and that's very important. Also really important to cover is the new DNI Bill PULTE. So I really want to cover this, even though it's been a little bit of a long show, going to go a little longer. So President Trump has just announced the appointment of acting director of national intelligence. And he's choosing his current chairperson for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, William Pulte, both companies extremely corrupt. I'm appointing director of Federal Housing and Finance Agency and chairman of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, William Pulte, to serve as acting director of national intelligence. He has deep experience managing the most sensitive matters in America, the safety and soundness of the markets, and over $10 trillion at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, a substantial increase from where it was just 12 months ago. So why is he picking him? Well, Pulte was the founder and former chairman of Pulte Group, serving in that capacity until his retirement in 2010, and he's not there now. Ryan Marshall is the current president and CEO. But Pulte served as the member of the board of directors until he was ousted in 2020. And why is Trump appointing someone who with no intelligence experience as DNI? Same reason he appointed two non-State Department, non-diplomat real estate developer Zionists to negotiate with Iran. NVIDIA has partnered with home builder Pulte Group, Bill Pulte's group, and California startup Span to install mini data centers called XFRA units on the exteriors of newly constructed homes. Yeah, they want to put data centers on your house. These cabinet-sized nodes use NVIDIA's liquid-cooled RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell Server Edition to tap into unused electrical grid capacity via SPAN's smart panels. That is, if you're not using electricity, they're going to use it for you. The initiative addresses growing public opposition and infrastructure bottlenecks for large data centers by deploying these units in suburban neighborhoods. So they can't build enough out, so they're going to put them in suburban neighborhoods in your home. PULTE Group facilitates installation in new communities, while SPAN claims the model can deploy capacity 6 times faster and at 1/5 the cost of building a comparable 100 megawatt centralized data center. Remember, what are these data centers really for? Well, I hypothesize central bank digital control, not central bank digital currency, but central bank digital control, so that on a hyper granular level, they can track your usage and what you are doing in your own home. NVIDIA wants to debut its Extra mini data center in your front yard. And it has a surveillance camera attached to it. The box will contain $250,000 worth of hardware, generate noise, leech off your electricity and internet like a parasite, and give you functionally nothing in return. In some conditions, they even take power priority over electrical vehicle charging. Well, Bill Pulte's own family foundation effectively disowned him, stating in no uncertain terms that he has nothing to do with the foundation. Pulte has claimed to have pitched Trump with the 50-year mortgage plan, which is a stupid plan as well. Trump tweeted about it last year, and was widely criticized for being a path to make the crisis worse. In 2010, the Arizona Attorney General claimed that Pulte Home Group, quote, defrauded consumers by informing them that they had, quote, pre-qualified for financing at certain interest rates, provided Spanish-speaking customers with different disclosures than English-speaking, end quote. The list goes on. While SPAN doesn't mention any cameras in it, its press release in its Extra website or in its statement addressing security and trust, a single render that we found depicts the Extra node with a security camera inside the composite box. Even though that's inside the composite box, we think it's a matter of time before they bring it external, because why would they have an internal camera? And of course, this is a $250,000 item, so you don't think they're going to have surveillance cameras on that item? Obviously, they are. Who's ever, I guess it's Earl Jackson. For some reason, I'm not able to read your posts there as well. Once again, you and John B. and Jeff P., another podcast, knocks it out of the park. Thank you. Can be used for target practice. Yes, there's a great, if you go to my Patreon, there's a great Gamers Nexus video that the guy talks about this in much more detail. He's a lot smarter than I am because I'm a dinosaur on this, but he talks about, oh, it would sure be terrible if these things got stolen or anything like that. But finally, lastly, what I wanted to go over was what's happening in France. And if you've ever been to France, like I have, the French are, pretty stutty. They want you to speak French. The last time they were of great use was, of course, during our revolution, when they finally came, the French Navy came. But they're very proud of their culture. The Louvre is fantastic. Notre Dame, which I think was started by Muslim arson, and I think they're just too politically correct. And now they're covering up this football soccer game win that is covering up Muslims who are actually saying, hey, we took over Paris quicker than the Nazis did, and they are burning it up, and they're burning the iconic Eiffel Tower as well. And there's off of X, an anonymous French firefighter says, we responded at 10 p.m. to a dumpster fire, black smoke everywhere, screams, explosions from mortars, groups of young people, often from immigrant backgrounds, he means Muslims, hooded, organized, charging at law enforcement like on a battlefield. Saw fellow police officers getting lynched with iron bars. He means choked out. Saw a police officer car pelted with stones. Border Patrol used to be able to shoot guys. A big rock or a bullet, what's the difference? It's a projectile. Threatening families. We're set upon by riders who screamed at us, calling us dogs. We're trying to save lives. This is a fireman, not a policeman. I picked up a 14-year-old kid covered in blood. Is this the France of the 2026 where you can't go out at night? If the veterans of World War II of Normandy saw this, they would not respond the way they have in the past. But this is the depopulation for repopulation that the global cabal, as in Kabbalah, is advocating and making happen very carefully. And Europe is basically finished and over. America is quickly following suit, but it is not quite there yet, but it could be soon. So thanks for listening today. Remember, our new sponsor there is masculinemanessentials.com/Jeffrey Prather. Use JP10 for 10% off. I'm going to have it's a father and son story, great story. I will have those guys on soon. So remember, here's the deep state's SOP for sabotaging spirit. Divert, distract, and disrupt via dumps of false flags interlaced with truth, theories with conspiracies, and proofs with propaganda, inundating with interrogatories while never confirming nor denying. This is what Joe Kent said. So nothing is binary. No black and white, no male and female, no good or evil, no God or Satan, just an endless sea of anything goes gray. Without a moral straight edge, you can't see the crooked. Lacking a spiritual compass, we are easily lost in satanic swamps. So exit their net and drop their freak. Instead of talking, singing, and praising and reading to God, try shutting up and listening. Stand to raise your antenna. When we talk, we send. But when sending, you can't receive. Release the send button. Become still and listen for God.